like to tell you a story today about the haves and the have-nots. I call it the parable of the life preservers. So for whatever reason you're floating in the water, say your boat sunk, say you never had one in the first place. A lot of people at one point in time at least had a rowboat or some kind of canoe, but those on the high seas, they wear out and you're in the water. And there's lots of boats around. It's a little bit like that movie Waterworld, somewhat. For the sake of the parable, that's the world. There's no land in this whole parable. Maybe I should have started with that. It's a world where everyone has forgotten or lost where the land even was. So there's only boats, people with boats, and people with no boats. And so you're sitting there in the water, treading water, and it really sucks to tread water. You can only make it like 9 or so hours, right? So you're like, help! And your situation is kind of precarious, and someone in a much larger boat sees you in the water. And they come, and they're like, oh my gosh, that looks pretty rough down there. I got something for you. I got a few of these things. They throw out a life preserver. Or heck, it could be anything, like a large bottle or any type of flotation device whatsoever, like a jangly raft, what have you. None of this, no type of boat. It's a big difference whether or not you have a boat or not. And for the sake of the parable. So they throw out, let's just say a life preserver. Which a lot of people in the boats just have a ton of these life preservers laying around, and it's not too much skin off anybody's back, and it makes a big difference to you, so of course kind of people are going to throw you a life preserver. You're like, oh, phew, now I can make it for a much longer time, without having to tread water. You really helped me out. That first life preserver you get is, and the people are like, oh, don't worry about it. It's no skin off our back. You enjoy that. Remember us, think a good thing about it. Pay it forward, and but we gotta scoot on, okay? And then they boat off. And so you're always trying to improve your position. So you're there at the life preserver. You don't got too much to do. You're just floating around. So you start thinking of ways to build a boat, what you can do to get a boat. So you're gonna need some wood. What kind of boat would you build? Would it be a catamaran? Would it be a? And so you start to maybe you find a notebook or something like that out in the ocean, and you begin to compile, maybe in boredom, like you start to fantasize maybe about what it would be like to have a boat, and what you would do with it, and and maybe you would write some essays about like the whole dynamic here, why some people have boats, why some people don't, what causes that, why is this, maybe the fundamentals of this whole dynamic aren't what we would call fair in a sense, something like that. So, or maybe start to think of things that might be good suggestions for ways the boats might be more distributed more evenly, what have you. You're in the water, plenty of time. You fill up this notebook, maybe 2, maybe 3. You have these plans here. Maybe you think of a whole, there's all kinds of different ways you can go with it. You could have like a political organization you want to get off the ground that's for people without boats that you're going to like band together. Maybe you want to just make a cooperative that you're just going to find some people that are cool that are in the water with you, which there are, and other people out there with just life preservers like you. Maybe you'll team up and start work on a boat committee of some kind or a boat team and build your own boat. Or maybe there are people, of course, who are not up to any good, for sure, in the water. Pretty much everything you'd see on on your most carnival float trip. People are causing nonsense. There are people who are damaging other people's boats for whatever reason, or so it's a little bit sketchy in the water, to be sure. But you hold out faith, right, that there are at least some people that are worth working with towards this, or that there'd be some way, that you could turn all these plans you've got and all the studying you've done about the world of boats into an actual boat. So the first few times you got some plans together, like you had one of these stories you wanted to make into a short film, or a small business you wanted to create that was for boat services, maybe to clean barnacles, what have you. All that stuff has startup costs, so you really can't do it with just a life preserver, and also your life preserver keeps wearing out. They get soggy and disintegrate gradually, and so you have to go back and say, hey, to the people with boats who you usually try and leave alone because you don't want to, whatever, they don't like to be pestered, and also there's neighborhoods or whatever where they don't just like people, floating around near their nice boats, because who knows what you could be up to. When I approach the boats, you have a pretty good reason. So you have in the past, been like, hey, this life preserver has failed. Is there any chance you have a life preserver? And they're like, oh, God, let me do a check. And they like, maybe they have one, maybe they don't, but oh, here's one for you. And they freely give you a life preserver, and you're like, oh my gosh, what a relief. Okay, this will keep me going for a while. But he's like, hold on, just one more thing. I have this plan here for a barnacle clearing company, and I can't just, the materials I need for it. I'm really trying to save up and get a boat, actually. You can see, because I've been down here in the water for a bit, and so I have this plan for a business, and it's just going to take a little bit of startup costs. I got to get these tools together, and I can't just find them in the water. It's really deep, and there's just the stuff just isn't laying around. But I could buy it at the shop. You start to notice a pattern that people are very disinterested in hearing about your business plan. The people in the boats just are. They seem to clam up right away, and also you notice that they kind of avoid you after that. That if they see you out in the water, they'll just kind of steer you away. You start to wonder if eventually, if you keep going on with this plan where you keep asking them for this, for some investment for your whatever plans you have to get a boat, which is really what it's about, because you've only got so much time here in the water before something bad happens. It's bad things happen to people that are floating in the water at a much higher rate. And you wonder how people got these boats in the first place. Everybody, there's a lot of people with boats, and you don't see anybody in the water just building a boat out of their bare hands, or really anybody, you don't even start to know anybody at the end, eventually, who went from one category to the other. Everybody you've seen in the water has been in the water your whole life. Everybody's in a boat has been in a boat your whole life. And you never see any switch between the two, and you're like, so how did people get boats in the first place? You want to, naturally, you start to think, you want to imitate success, right? You want to go see boats. There has to be a way. If people have boats, there has to be a way eventually to get these boats. And somebody had to assemble them, and somebody put this wood together, and you start asking around, everywhere you go, you have your ear to the ground, you buy all the magazines, you buy the magazines that people in the boat read about, and you start to notice this pattern that no one ever talks about how they got their boat. Isn't that funny? And over the course of, say, a decade or two, this whole, floating around in the water, talking to everybody, you hear a few stories, and you meet a couple people who said, oh man, I got this boat, I'm so glad I did. And you're like, how did you get your boat? And in every single instance, well, no, there's a couple of different ways. Someone died and gave someone a boat. That happens pretty often. My dad gave me a boat, or where's my dad even? Okay, fine, that's just like, sky's blue, some people are born with boats, fine, okay. This one guy says that he was at this church or something, and someone gave him investment money to start a company, and eventually sold the company, and they got him a boat. And you see people out there that have multiple boats, that are renting boats out, and those people have franchise operations, and then you read this. There's this book out there, Rich Boating Dad, Poor Boating Dad. You read this book, and there's just all these asset structures about accounting that make it so that once you have a boat, it's actually a lot easier to do your taxes. You have to have an accountant to understand even all the stuff that's going on with that, and you'll never, accountants don't even talk to people who are in the water. So I'm just going to tell you what happens to that person who notices that, who sees that happening. You get frustrated. That person just gets really, jaded, maybe some people might say, gets maybe bitter. World isn't fair. It always sucks for me. Right? So I'm always a student of human motivation. What drives a person like that? And then, of course, you wonder, there's these people out there causing all this trouble, and you're like, what's their motivation? Well, do you think there's a connection between the two? I think it pretty obviously is. That some people just get frustrated at that level and stop caring about anybody, and especially people in the boats. There are other people, though, that are like, I'm going to have to ask for another life preserver here in a little bit, and I don't even want to. I don't want to talk with those people anymore. Sure, they might give me a life preserver, but they clearly look down on me and pity me. And you think about all the times that maybe you were on a boat, that you were invited to a party, and you got to leave, and you think about the stuff that you said that just kind of stands out, that makes you a little bit awkward around people who have boats. Because you like admire, like, oh my gosh, it's not even leaking. You'll say things like that, and it'd be like, wow, how did you have 2 different motors for it? Whoa, and they're like, yeah, of course we've got 2 different motors. Of course it doesn't leak, right? They'll be saying, and of course you won't have the right clothes. You're dripping wet, and you're dripping water all over everything. It's like you can't keep a tuxedo dry in the ocean with life preserver. And it's not that, then it starts to be like you have anxiety then. Oh my gosh, am I going to say the wrong thing? Do I look okay? I'm dripping wet. I'm on this. Is this guy ever going to invest in my idea? And even if I presented it, maybe you have like this business plan tucked away in this dried pouch, and you're just thinking, if I could just get him in, and if he would just understand, he could make a lot of money with this, if we could invest with it, But no, there's no way. People with boats don't invest in people who don't have boats. There's no way to go from having not a boat to having a boat. It'll just humiliate me. He doesn't see me as the type of person that could even do business, or maybe he could even pilot a boat. Because the reputation of people who are wet precedes me. He's terrified of other wet people all the time. I could be just some con man, right? That could be just here to, because where do I even come from? I'm just a guy, can't even have a business card really. Goes get wet too. But what would it say? Just some from the water. I've life preserver 75260. Well, you start to wonder, like, what you're even fighting for. Like, if all the people in the boats are just kind of don't give you the time of day, won't ever believe in you as a person, or have this mentality that like, oh, of course you can get a boat, but there's nothing I can do, like, certainly give you a life preserver, right? But maybe not pretend. Maybe that's just not something that they're into. That's the prerogative. Not to ever really help people get boats and only deal in life preservers. But that's the parable, though. Eventually, our guy in the life preserver stops asking for help. Some people get desperate at that point and get angry and do mean things to other people, but not our guy. No, he just kind of falls into the water and no one ever hears from him again. And I wonder about human motivation. If you want to live in a good society, people have to have incentives to improve themselves. And people who have their stuff together, I think, have a duty beyond life preserver distribution. Which is not just generating other humans and procreating the species, but actually propagating the number of people who have boats, in a metaphor, and that is the difference between poverty and not poverty. it is the difference between floating in the water with a life preserver and having a sea ray. If the whole world flooded right now, that's what would, we'd quickly be, everybody with the rowboat would have a significant increase in status. And there would be a ton of extra life preservers, and I think that our society, we have plenty of food and water. There's this one, I heard this someplace, man does not live on bread alone. It's true, we live on ideas. We have to have something to look forward to. And if there's, in our world of technology, with zero startup costs, you're twiddling your thumbs, you're sitting there with a notebook, the moral of the story is, don't just invest in if you ever have money in savings and your stuff is together, you have to be investing in people's businesses. Look around at every single person you know who has their basic stuff together, isn't getting out of, rehab or prison, or maybe especially those people, I don't know. And find out what's going to get them interested in life, or what their one dream is. And likewise, people that are in the water, if you're going to have any chance of getting a boat, you've got to be able to. You got to work on getting along with people in boats, and that means not robbing them, not haunting them, not mugging them, not doing all this stuff that makes it really difficult to like you. And also have a plan. Get a business plan together. Have an idea. Be working on things that you could do if you had resources, and starting small. Don't go all Elon Musk in the first on your first outing. Where everybody's like, I think everybody is entitled to have a business plan on the scale of starting their own McDonald's. If somebody can buy a franchise Subway, everybody should be able to start a franchise Subway. Or it's legitimate to have a business plan for that and ask for the money up front to do it. And the other moral of the story is, people who have boats and potentially invest in the money just hide from all the people who are out there with life preservers, you're a bunch of jerks. And you're the ones that are perpetuating a society that has people drowning all the time and has people desperate to the point that they want to rob other people. It's the parable of the life preserver. I think everybody on the planet should hear it. I'm J. Michael Hudson. I like to tell stories. I like to sing songs. I like to invent things. I hope you like my channel.